Straddling the border of southern Kentucky and northern Tennessee, Fort Campbell is not only a massive military installation, but a very active one. It's the home base of the U.S. Army's famous 101st Airborne Division, the 5th Special Forces Group, aka the Green Berets, and another elite group, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, also known as the Night Stalkers. The main section of the base, where the barracks, offices, commissary, and other buildings are, is relatively small in comparison to the overall size of the base. The rest of the base is made up of the 93,000 acres of dense forests, grassy fields, streams, and lakes that are often used by these units for various live fire and field training purposes. This large stretch of wilderness is simply known as the Back 40. It's kind of an old American expression that farmers use to refer to a large, remote area of land located far from the main house or buildings. If I've learned anything in my years of researching the strange and unexplained in relation to the military, Fort Campbell is a base that seems to pop up quite often, maybe even too much for the sake of the soldiers and their families living there. Being in the military can be challenging enough on its own, but on Fort Campbell, there have been numerous reports of hauntings in areas of base housing, such as Pierce Village, Hammond Heights, and Lee Village. There have been highly documented UFO sightings nearby, one being all of the weird, egg-shaped objects and other things cited by multiple military personnel around Kentucky the same day Air Force Captain Thomas Mantell was killed chasing one of them in January 1948, or a Ramiel diamond-shaped craft being chased by Chinook helicopters around Fort Campbell and frying one of the base's radio towers, as reported by an Army police officer in the 1980s. Then there's the unexplained creature sightings, like the Kelly-Hopkinsville Green Men encounter in 1955, and a growing list of terrifying Bigfoot encounters in the area. In short, Fort Campbell is not only an active military hub, it seems to be a magnet for the paranormal. But this isn't a ghost story or a UFO story, and although some might think so, it's not even a Bigfoot story. This is something else. According to the men in these accounts, and taking into account stories from nearby states, like Michigan, there is another kind of terrifying creature that roams through Fort Campbell's training grounds. As told by the soldiers who witnessed it, this is the smoke pit, and these are true stories of dogman encounters in the Back 40. Oh, 12 days down. 2 more to go. Whew, this bites. I should order a pizza. Hey, does anybody remember our grid point? Huh? Oh. It's just the RTO again. Hey man, I know you're doing battery runs, but do you happen to have any caffeine on you? Like a Monster or something? What the hell are you doing? You know I can't hear you, right? Good thing you're a radio man, not a sniper, because... Oh shit. Oh!
What the hell is that?
What the... The stories you're about to hear were first submitted to Nick Orton's Tales from the Grid Square project. All of the soldiers who shared these accounts were stationed on Fort Campbell, conducting field training at various times and dates when these events happened. The first soldier writes, I'm stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. The training area we have is called the Back 40, thousands of acres of ranges and training sites. My story takes place in the Back 40 near a makeshift town called Cassidy. It's located in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by forest and thick underbrush, and at that time, It was mid-July, so everything was in full bloom. My company was conducting a 2-week field exercise in this area, and after we had secured this town, my platoon was tasked with pulling a blocking position about 100 meters into the wood line from this town. So this is like day 12 of the 2-week field exercise. I'm located on the far right of our blocking position with my squad. I'm a squad leader of my infantry platoon, and we dig into our position. I'm located 10 to 15 meters from my soldiers with my back up against a tree. Darkness sets on the back 40, the guys are tired, and my team leaders are doing their checks to ensure these guys are awake. Hours go by, and I didn't keep track of time, but if I had to guess, it was around midnight. No moon. Only thing you could see was to our rear, where the town of Cassidy was located. My Alpha team leader is laying with his team on the line, and we're pulling a 50-50 security detail, so one man up, the other asleep. My Bravo team leader is sleeping next to me. Our platoon radio man, the RTO, is walking back and forth behind us, bouncing between my squad and the others all on line in this blocking position. So every 20 to 30 minutes, I hear him walking by, and eventually he comes to me and says, "Hey, Sergeant, you good on radio batteries?" "I'm good, dude," I reply. So being used to hearing him walking by so much, I hear something, and not even thinking about it, I ignore it. Then it gets closer and closer and a lot slower in movement. I look over my shoulder and say, "What the F are you doing?" And that's when I saw whatever it was in a mid-crouch pose about 20 meters from me, making these low, subtle growling noises like a dog or wolf. I froze and felt the hair on the back of my neck stand and my heart start to race. Whatever this was stood at least 5 foot tall, crouched over, sinking lower and lower to the ground. At this point, paralyzed with confusion and fear, and I watch it for another 10 to 12 seconds, and then I reached and grabbed my e-tool, this small shovel, not taking my eyes off what I'm looking at. Then I quickly flipped my PSQ-20s, my night vision, and as I did this, this creature ran in a diagonal line for me, fast. And when I say fast, I mean booking it in a low stance. I flipped my 20s to thermal, and I saw the outline of this thing running. Everyone around me heard it crashing through the woods. It ran too fast to be a man, and too big to be a deer, especially since it was fully standing up as it was crashing through the brush. Whatever it was eventually came back. Later that night, another squad leader told me that he heard loud, deep sniffing noises near his position, and his soldiers were saying that they could smell what resembled a wet dog smell. Sometime before dawn, all of us heard this loud, guttural noise that started up immediately after we heard some coyotes. Coyotes are pretty common in the area, and you'll always hear them yipping and whatnot. But when this thing howled, or whatever this noise was, the coyotes all stopped instantly. I had always heard stories and never believed it, as well as others in my platoon. But after this encounter, we all agreed that we were not alone that night, and there is something lurking out there. It was canine by the look of it. It was dark. I don't want to speculate and give false details, but in the face, it was elongated like a snout from what I could see. I grew up playing in the woods, camping and hunting. I'd never seen or heard anything like that or felt like that, ever.
Hey, Sergeant.
Yeah.
Our hole is filling with water.
Yep. It sure is.
Okay.
Anyone got any cigarettes? Preferably dry ones. It's times like these that make me wonder if 4 years of this is really worth the free college. Don't forget about the Dodge Charger.
Yeah.
Who's that?
Probably the RTO again.
Yo, what are you doing? You lose something back there? Need any help? We've all got our nods.
Is that a coyote?
Sounds way too big to be a coyote. Haynes, get your nods up. The interesting thing here is that the second story seems to have happened during the same exercise as the first, but possibly not on the same night, based on the timelines these two soldiers mentioned. But whether it was or not, we have a second soldier reporting an unnerving animal encounter while in the field on Fort Campbell, this time during a cloudburst. While there are many species of wild animals living in the dense forests of Kentucky, both on and off the base, again, this one wasn't something that they recognized. As with the first soldier, this was largely because of the way the thing moved. I was in the 1st Battalion, 502nd Infantry Regiment. Our company had just taken Cassidy, a training town, after about 5 days of situational training exercise, what we called STX. With the town secured, we get pushed out to the wood line to set up a defensive line for any potential follow-on attacks, and naturally it starts pissing on us as soon as we get into the woods. At this point, dudes are spent and annoyed that we got pushed out of the village, where there was, cover. We could have been in the buildings or something, but no, we got to go out in the woods. There was a lot of the usual, why is it always our platoon type deal. So we set up a perimeter, setting up a position running perpendicular to a ditch located on the left of our position. The squad leader and myself are co-located with the gunner and assistant gunner. As we lay in the rain, it didn't take long for us to just stop giving a crap. We just ended up leaning back on some trees, side by side, waiting for the index or change of mission. While we were smoking and joking, minus the smoking since at this point our cigarettes were soggy mush, up walks the platoon RTO to swap some 148, our handheld radio batteries. We notice him early due to the leaves and twigs and the sound of all of his 140 pounds walking slowly and cautiously through the forest. He makes the swap and walks off. About 20 or 30 minutes pass, and we hear the same weighted footsteps approaching. None of us had our nods, our night vision down, or even on, so we just assumed that it was the RTO. The footsteps got close, and we waited for him to say something, but it was just quiet. And after a moment of awkward silence, we call out like, "Yo, what are you doing?" But again, there was no response. Then we heard what I can only describe as heavy sniffing sounds from behind us. Sounded like a hound dog trying to find something. The sound seemed to come from a few meters back behind my squad leader on the right. We sat there and listened, trying to figure out what it was. Then we hear the sounds of crunching leaves and more sniffing somewhere between me and the assistant gunner. Now startled, the gunner and I bring up our nods and turn around to see what the hell this thing was. And at that point, we hear this thing as it now barrels into the ditch on our right and speeds down deeper into the woods. And all of us are just sitting there dumbfounded at what just happened. whatever that thing was, it was way too heavy sounding to be a coyote. Its footsteps sounded more like someone or something sprinting on 2 legs instead of 4. So that ruled out a hog, skunk, or any other normal animal out in the woods with us. We kind of all looked at each other. And I mean, we'd all heard stories. So that's when it hits us, like, damn. Maybe we just saw something people called the Dogman. As I say, we were well aware of the Dogman, be it on the back 40 or in the woods of the Land Between the Lakes area. The funny thing was, our first sergeant is super into the lore, I guess you'd call it. And we mentioned this thing happening to us, and then he gives us this huge backstory on Dogman, and he mentioned stuff about how the Native Americans were pushed off the Land Between the Lakes area to settle it, only for them to then curse it, and some other crazy sounding stuff. This next soldier was serving with the same airborne unit as the first 2, but it's uncertain whether his encounter took place on the same night as the first 2. The first soldier mentioned being in a 2-week training exercise, and this third soldier says his was a 4-week exercise. While the legend of the Dogman creature typically stands on its own as being some kind of undocumented bipedal animal, as alluded to in the last story, this next soldier offers a possible explanation as to what the origin of the Dogman really is. He believes it might be a creature spoken about often in native folklore. He also got a much better look at it. I'm in the 101st Airborne's 1st Battalion, 502nd Infantry Regiment. There's a lot of rumors and superstition among the guys about skinwalkers and old Native American spirits on the back 40. The Trail of Tears ran right through the base, and there's tons of unmarked graves that the Army has either intentionally ignored or simply lacks the funding to do anything about. But anyway, one night during a 4-week training density in the back 40 of Fort Campbell, a buddy and I are pulling guard on a road using our NVGs. We're laying down on the roadside, and there's this storm drain pipe that runs under the road horizontally a couple of feet to our 7 o'clock. It's around 0200 in the morning, so it's dark, there's a light rain falling. I'm watching the road one way, and my buddy is watching the other way as we wait for the enemy. And that's when something strange happened. All of a sudden, my buddy is rolling around, whooping and hollering about something touching him. Like, it grabbed me, bro. Holy effing shit, it tried to pull me into the drain. I didn't know what the hell was going on, so I peeked my head into the storm drain to have a look. From somewhere inside, I heard what sounded like grunting, kind of like a wild boar. It was distant, but I also swore I could hear the sound of human feet slapping on concrete as it ran away. I stepped back from the drain and aimed my NVGs across the street towards the exit of the drain pipe while my buddy crawled away. What I saw, standing across the road in the tree line, 75 meters away, looking right at us, can only be described as a legit Dogman. It had to be 8 to 9 feet tall, with a canine's head, the body of a wolf, and standing on its hind legs. Its shoulders were broad, but I couldn't tell if it had hair or if its skin was just leathery. But I did see ears, pointy and large, almost elfish-like. On seeing it, I yelled and let off a burst of sim rounds. We didn't have any live ammunition, right? Of course. Not gonna lie, it scared the complete hell out of me. This Dogman then turned and runs into the woods. It's knocking down some of the smaller trees and snapping some of them in half, as it then dropped down to all fours and ran away. About a week after this happened, I was with my commanding officer and RTO. Our night vision was on, and we are walking through the thickest brush you've ever seen in your life. I'm talking thorn bushes like 10 feet tall. It was like trying to walk through a giant broom. The whole company gets separated in this mess, and that's when we hear it. There were these howls coming from somewhere in between our platoons. Our CO even put word out on the radio, asking what the hell it was. There was no way a normal animal was moving around so quickly in the type of brush we were in. It was freaky. Some of us were later called into our first sergeant's office, and we retold this story. He basically said to keep it to ourselves and to never say anything about it to anyone. Whatever that thing was, it tore my buddy's uniform up pretty bad when it grabbed him and tried to pull him into the drain pipe. I still think about it, often. I can still see the eyes. Those are what stood out the most. When I looked at it under nods, its eyes were glowing.
Jeez, this ain't creepy at all. When's the last time anyone's ever been out here? Does the army even use these buildings anymore?
I don't think so. Half these things are falling apart.
We're sure that these buildings are empty, right? This kind of looks like the kind of neighborhood the Hills Have Eyes people would live in.
Chill out. I'm sure PMO patrols through here all the time. Look, most of the doors have locks on them.
That one doesn't.
Huh?
The wooden hut over there. The door's open.
You want to go look inside?
Yeah, okay.
Just gonna push this open.
Oh, dude!
This last story centers around two soldiers who got bored late at night, typical, during training, and snuck off to walk around one of the back 40's numerous mock villages. Many of these training sites and buildings are abandoned. Since the base is so big, the army seems to just leave things to rot instead of spending tax dollars on tearing them down when it isn't absolutely necessary. But as I've heard from police officers stationed on the base, these buildings can be an attractive spot for squatters and vagrants who hop the fences. And, evidently, other things. I was in the middle of Operation Lethal Eagle 3, which was a field training exercise for the 3rd Brigade Combat Team at Fort Campbell. I'm an air traffic controller attached to the command post, and at the time of this writing, what I'm about to tell you happened only a few days ago. I'm on the night shift with my buddy, and every other group has already gone back to the rear, except for our main staff and anyone running the CP, as well as an artillery battery not far from the CP site. So that means there's really nothing for me and my buddy to do. Being bored, we left the CP and went for a little nighttime walk, heading to the woodline or exploring the small wooden and concrete huts of the training village we were currently set up in. But this night, we decided to sneak past the road guard, who was another dude we knew, just sitting under a tarp with some NVGs. We snuck past him and went to this other village a short ways down the road. There was just enough moonlight that we didn't need anything else to guide us. We arrive at this place, and it's a collection of 6 wooden huts and 6 concrete shacks, and they are completely abandoned. So we walk in, and we finally turn on our headlamps, our red lights, as we are now far enough away and at a much lower risk of being caught. And this whole place just gives me the creeps. Tall, overgrown grass, these old, dilapidated structures, buildings. The doors on most of them were locked, but one of them was hanging open just a bit. So we're standing there on the gravel road, just staring at this open door, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was inside of it. We close the gap, and my friend takes point, reaching to push the door further open. And just as he does so, the entire back wall of the wooden shack starts to shake, and we hear a very loud kicking of the gravel for a few moments. We both jumped back when this happened and braced ourselves for someone or something to come charging out at us from the open door. But there was nothing. When everything went silent, my buddy pushes the door fully open, and we now see that the room is completely empty. The only thing we really noticed was that one area had a large amount of the gravel that had been moved to reveal a patch of fresh dirt, and the back wall had a massive hole in it. There seemed to be a kind of rut below the hole. Like, you see if you put a dog up against a wall, it's going to dig under the wall. This looked like something had scraped its way past this wall at least a couple of times. And when we saw this, I froze in place. The hairs on the back of my neck start standing up. And then we heard something outside the door behind us, rustling around in the tall grass. We quickly turned, and in the light of the moon, we could see the outline of what I first thought was a large, like a really strong-looking man, mostly hidden in the grass with his head exposed. Well, I would have assumed it was a man if it didn't have a canine, wolf-like head with reflective eyes staring back at us. I want to chalk up what we saw to being a coyote, because there's certainly plenty of them around the base. But no coyote is built like that. It was silent, and so were we. We just kind of stayed there for a few moments, watching one another. Then my buddy raised his arms and stomped forward, the sort of thing you do if you wanted to scare off an animal. But this thing barely flinched, if only slightly, before it then slowly dropped its head back below the top of the grass. We immediately knew that we needed to leave, and watching each other's backs, we hightailed it out of there as quickly and quietly as possible. All the while, that burning sensation of being watched stayed with me for the entire walk. We didn't want to run. Didn't seem like a good idea. And the whole time, I just had this horrible sense of being watched as we walked back to our CP. So we sneak past the road guard again, and we get back to the CP. And once there, we take a deep breath and started to talk about what we had just seen. I still can't fully explain what it was, but the fear that I felt while looking at it was like nothing I've ever experienced in my life. As far as cryptid stories go, Dogman stories seem to be as old as any of the other strange creatures roaming the woods. Encounters seem to stretch back even before the arrival of white settlers. During the early days of colonization, French trappers and frontiersmen working with Shawnee fur traders were told by the natives to be wary of a shape-shifting creature they called the loup-garou. According to one of their legends, a Shawnee medicine man gained the ability to transform into a wolf. However, he began abusing this power and was killed while still in his wolf form. It is said that his vengeful spirit still roams the woods. It seems the French combined these trapper stories with their own legends of European werewolves, As a result, the native loup-garou became the inspiration for the rougarou, a werewolf-like creature of Cajun folklore that is said to stalk the swamps, bayous, and forests of Louisiana. But whether Dogman has been seen as far south as Louisiana or not, calling it folklore makes it seem like it's only stories. Far from being told only as a native legend, one of the first documented encounters with a dog-faced humanoid creature took place in 1887 in Wexford County, Michigan, as witnessed by two lumberjacks. The men described the creature as a 7-foot-tall monster with a dog's head and the torso of a man, and it was said to have blue or amber eyes with a howl that sounded like a human. They also stated that it walked upright on its 2 hind legs. Since then, there have been numerous sightings reported throughout Michigan, most of which are in the northwest Lower Peninsula. The creature is locally known as the Michigan Dogman. The notoriety of the Dogman creature really began in the late 1970s or early 1980s, though. A family visiting from Florida was found torn to pieces in their RV in the Land Between the Lakes National Recreation Area. The campground spans the border of Kentucky and Tennessee. The names of the parents aren't recorded, but they apparently had 2 children, Bradley and Megan. Megan wasn't found with the rest of her family inside the RV, though. Police reportedly stated that her remains had been hauled up into a tree. A police deputy named Philip Douglas and a state trooper named William Folkson discovered the bodies. It's difficult to source any official police reports to substantiate this gruesome story, not that anyone could expect the police to document this sort of thing as anything other than an animal attack. But whether all of the stories about Dogman are as true as they are told, the people living in and around the Land Between the Lakes area are affected by these stories still today. The existence of the Dogman, locally called the Beast of the Land Between the Lakes, is far from being an obscure legend. Many Kentucky and Tennessee locals have heard the stories. A fairly recent interview in 2020 for the Hoptown Chronicle produced a statement from a public affairs specialist with the U.S. Forest Service. When Carlin Lewis was asked about his knowledge of the creature, he stated the following.
We have no evidence, records, documentation of any validated sightings of the beast. Some of our staff have worked on Land Between the Lakes for many years. A lot of them know every nook and cranny. They've never seen anything that would point back to a beast existing.
The article was written by journalist Dalton York, and it highlights the controversy surrounding the Beast of LBL folklore, which is evidently considered offensive by some former residents of the Land Between the Rivers or Land Between the Lakes LBL area. Their families were displaced by the Tennessee Valley Authority in the 1940s to make way for the construction of 2 large man-made lakes, part of the state's regional development goals for things like flood control, navigation improvement, and hydroelectric power generation. But this displacement meant that people lost their family homes and had to relocate. The Dogman folklore has since become a touchy issue for residents who don't like the idea of their home being associated with a far-fetched legend. Families feel that the legend disrespects their rich local history and the memory of their communities, particularly the hundreds of family cemeteries that remain in the area. Still, the stories being shared about the creature encounters, like the ones shared by the soldiers here, are anything but insincere. These individuals present themselves as very serious about what they saw, as much as any person who has encountered a Bigfoot or any of the other strange things seen in the woods around Kentucky and Tennessee. Word has it that the stories alone are enough to make hunters shy away from the area around the lakes. It's widely known to be a place that is best avoided. A few of those that have been called either brave or dumb enough to try hunting in the woods have later said that they did have the ominous feeling of being watched. That, of course, could just be their imagination, but even though they've never found any evidence to verify the creature's existence, some park rangers have reportedly stated that they are often asked by nervous campers about strange howls often heard coming from the woods at night. Perhaps even these howls are cases of mistaken identity. But then, considering there are stories about a dog-headed creature prowling around the land between the lakes area, maybe we shouldn't be surprised that soldiers training on Fort Campbell have seen the same thing. After all, the base and its massive Back 40 training area is situated only about 16 miles away from the land between the lakes, just to the east. One more reason our soldiers should try to stay awake on Firewatch. Hey guys, thanks for sticking around for the after action here in the credits. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Nick Orton, who runs the Tales from the Grid Square project. If you want more strange and spooky tales from the military world, please go check out his socials and published work. He actually just released a new book titled The Transcript, which is a collection of short military-themed horror stories written by Nick himself. It's a great read, and that's coming from both me and Jake, who put this script together. And if you're into what we do here at Wartime Stories, I really cannot recommend his stuff enough. That being said, guys, serious talk. What is up with Fort Campbell? You guys got Bigfoots.
Fort Campbell is a United States Army installation located on the Kentucky-Tennessee border. It is home to the 101st Airborne Division and the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. This is from agoda.com and Wikipedia.
Did I say he who shall not be named? Because I don't want him to talk anymore. Did I say that? My phone, your phone's always listening to you. Anyway, thank you, Wiretap. You guys got Bigfoots, green men, UFO sightings, now dogmen. I mean, what else am I going to hear about from Fort Campbell? Is this, and I remember doing a little bit of a deep dive on ley lines and how some ley lines crossed in the Fort Campbell area. It's like, is that area just like the paranormal crossroads? Pretty sure Champ Ferguson, the serial killer, the Civil War serial killer, also kind of operated in and around that Kentucky-Tennessee border area as well. That's where he was from. Man, what an interesting place. Funny story. I'm looking at I got a, it's a 30 millimeter shell casing fired from an Apache helicopter on Fort Campbell. The shell casing I'm holding is from Fort Campbell, and it was picked up by my buddy Jimmy. If you've been around the channel for a while, you've heard me talk about him before. So, and I think he picked up this habit while we were deployed together. We would always pick up brass and shell casings and stuff like that. There were helicopters flying around at times, and we would always pick up some FOD like this, just stuff that we could take home and turn into our own little arts and crafts. I took some M203, what are those, 40 millimeter grenade shell casings. They're, grenade launchers that you put on the front end of your A2 or your M4 rifle. And I made some shot glasses out of that, apparently, because his mom gave me this shell casing, but apparently after he had done some targeting runs with his Apache, he, as a warrant officer, snuck on to the base. Forgive me if I'm not supposed to be telling a story, but Jimmy, I'm sure you're not going to get in trouble. But he snuck on to the targeting range at night. I had to hop a fence to get onto it, and picked up these shell casings, which is, you're not supposed to do that, but that was Jimmy. So, and he made some shot glasses out of them, and then he gave them to his buddies for his graduation ceremony. And he had them engraved as well. He had their names put on it, their unit insignia and stuff like that. It was really cool. So his mom gave me one of these. But yeah, Jimmy, what a character. But Fort Campbell, like, what a weird place, because that's where his helicopter actually crashed. So Fort Campbell is like always coming full circle on this show. So hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Keep the weird stories coming. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Thank you for watching, for subscribing, liking, commenting, sharing the video, everything you guys do to help support the channel. And as always, a huge shout out to both my Patreon and YouTube channel members for their incredible support. May God be with each and every one of you, no matter what you are dealing with, and I will see you in the next episode.